artist talk. I invite you all to, fill up your plate, have a drink, add to whatever you have. If you haven't helped yourself to anything, please do so. We don't want to be left with leftovers here. So I'm so appreciative of all of you who are here tonight. Welcome to the tonight's First Friday Art Talk for the month of June. It's nice to see some familiar faces as well. I'm Susan Fragg, and I'm your moderator for the evening. We have a one-of-a-kind First Friday Art Talk planned for tonight. We're featuring interdisciplinary artist Koyczan, who is a digital and cultural innovator. So expect to be immersed, astounded, and to expand your experience with what art is. So let me take a moment first to thank some important people. So we have Karen Schulz. I'm not quite sure where she went for the moment, but she's usually in that corner there. And Karen is actually the producer for First Fridays, and we really appreciate her support. We have Claire in the back, who is our tech wizard, and she also leads the art walk, which will leave at 7:15 tonight. And we're very appreciative of Video Pool, who support us in using the output room here as well. So I want to start by saying we are gathered here on Treaty 1 territory, which is the traditional land of the Anishinaabe, Cree, Oji-Cree, Dene, and Dakota people, and the homeland of the Métis Nation. In furthering the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's calls to action, we foster learning and understanding about Indigenous history, culture, and perspective. So now I'm turning to Koyczan. Casey is a Dene interdisciplinary artist, originally from Yellowknife. He creates art to better understand who we are, where we come from, and where we are going. He explores how culture and technology can grow together, and his work leans towards digital creation using the likes of 3D, virtual reality, VR, augmented reality, AR, audio, and video. Very proudly, Casey is one of 30 Canadian visual artists that has been longlisted for the very prestigious Sobey Art Award. Casey entered 2 artworks for consideration for this award: his walk cycle series, Tadŭetła, which is called Walk in a Circle, and the short VR film, Ełeghàà, All at Once, which we will view at this evening's art talk. Now, Casey has said that I am forgiven for any mispronunciations of Dene language. He appreciates me trying. So if I've completely butchered that, I know I'm okay by Casey, which I really appreciate. I just want to mention to you, I first saw Casey's artwork at the Winnipeg Art Gallery in 2017. It was the Insurgents Resurgence exhibition of contemporary Indigenous art. Casey had been commissioned to do a piece for that exhibition, and we will see that tonight. It was dedicated to missing, murdered women and girls. It's called Gone but Not Forgotten. I was leading tours at the Winnipeg Art Gallery at that time, and it was just so moving. As I told Casey, I almost felt emotionally shattered by it. So we'll see what your reactions are when it comes up as part of the presentation. So at this point, I'm going to turn now the mic and the computer over to Casey. I think where I'd like to start, though, is I'd like to start by asking you, Casey, about where you started. We talked about the various types of art that you have done, where you started, the art media that you used at the beginning of your career, and then how it evolved and you started to work with other media, and where you're at now. And I think it would just, as part of preparing, the audience for what they're going to see here today, I think it would be really interesting to get some insight about that.
Okay. First of all, thank you for having me. Thank you for coming. To go way back, even really before I could understand what art was, I started with photography when I was like 7 years old. I acquired a disposable camera because back then McDonald's had like cool prizes and toys for their meals and stuff, so they were giving away these like little disposable cameras. So I got to take some pictures, and my dad developed them or got them developed. So that was kind of like the first sort of part where it's like I sort of made this, or this is like a part of my vision that's been kind of transposed into this physical medium, right? Going through elementary, or mostly like junior high and high school, I didn't really take any arts classes. I took an arts class in grade 7 for like a semester. But then it wasn't until the end of high school where I was introduced to the Adobe suite, so like Photoshop, Illustrator, and mostly Adobe Premiere, because I was doing a lot of photo and film kind of stuff, like filming a lot of skateboarding and rollerblading. A lot of my friends were into mountain biking and BMX, so I'd go with them and film them and that sort of thing, bring my camera up to the ski hill and snowboard with it. So I really got into filmmaking within high school, and then attending college at Lethbridge College. I took their multimedia production program, and that just opened up so many different opportunities for ways to create art, encompassing graphic design, video, audio, business and entrepreneurship, multimedia law, which was surprisingly really, really helpful. And that's when I was introduced to 3D as well. So it really got me going in a lot of multimedia-based artwork. And then throughout my BFA is where I started to learn more about art history and contemporary arts practices. Went in with the anticipation that I was going to come out of it with like master drawing and illustrating and painting skills, but like within my second year, it's like, man, I'm not that good at it. I gotta do something else. So when I discovered sculpture and installation, that really I fell in love with it right away, because it made me feel like I can do anything. I can populate this space or this room with like more of a feeling or a concept or an emotion or idea. So that's where a lot of my practice kind of started to lean towards, and I started to use a lot of like organic material within my installations. So this is a piece called Audio Assemblage. It was the first sort of mixed media installation with organic materials that I created inside of a building, because I'd done a couple site-specific sort of pieces before that. But what's going on here is that it's basically like a grid of set up in a way that is implementing microphones and speakers. Like there's a few different microphones in this piece, and they're all wired in behind a bunch of multi-effect pedals that are behind this kind of bigger piece here, and then going out into the headphones that are acting as speakers. So people in the sort of space can interact with it in a certain way. And it really just opened up a lot of ideas for me. Moving into my MFA, which I'll show slides with that, was kind of a continued, matured version of my BFA grad work.
So with this particular artwork, the microphones that hang down from the installation, are they on, or is it more of a visual?
Nope, they're on, and they're collecting any sounds that are present within the space. So you can even go up and speak into them as well. And there's a distortion pedal, a delay pedal, and I think a reverb behind there as well. So it's kind of affecting the sounds within the space as well.
So the sense I get from what you're describing is that you're creating something that viewers can really interact with. This is not standing back and taking it in visually. This is something that you can actually walk up to and interact with the art.
Yep, exactly.
Wonderful. Okay, something that I always ask an artist at the beginning of an art talk is to, share with us where your inspiration comes from. I know that's quite a big question, but I think that people really wonder about that. What's driving you in the artwork that you're creating?
Well, I tend to allow myself to be inspired by anything and everything, like as much as possible, right? Like, because I don't have a linear form or formula of working or creating, So inspiration can come from numerous different places, whether it's like emotion, music. I listen to a lot of music, a lot of instrumental music as well. Words, Dene culture, Dene language, like with a lot of my artworks, that's kind of how I'm learning my language is through titling my works with Dene words. So it's always a very slow process, but it's a process regardless. Technology can really inspire artworks as well, like what technology can do, the advancements in technology that we're making, how that could be applied to various different things, how I can use various forms of technology to create artwork about my culture, which in turn can help me learn more about my culture, because I was always kind of like, not always removed from it throughout my life, but I left Yellowknife when I was 7 years old. So that began the disconnect with my culture. So it was only until my early adulthood that I started to recognize the importance of learning more about that.
I've heard you say that, you talk about how technology and culture can grow together. In your practice is what I think you were referring to. How can you give us a little bit more insight about what you mean by that, the idea of technology, culture, growing together? And I'm assuming that it's with your imprint.
Right. So one example that I can provide for that is there's a lot of different like Dene dialects out there. The one that I've most identified with and been part of is the Tadŭetła dialect. So there's like a Tadŭetła language app that was created. That provides a lot of insight for phonetics and pronunciation, because like Tadŭetła is a very difficult language to
no
learn and to say, like, with a lot of the titles, there's a lot of glottal stops within the language and a lot of like nasal things that are going on. So to have an app where you can actually hear someone speaking the words helps you a lot more rather than just like a English to Tadŭetła dictionary, right? Which is what I was using for many years until this app came out. And it's like, okay, like that's how you say this word, So it's just one example of how culture and technology can kind of like work together in order to provide sort of more insight. If I were able to learn everything sitting down with an elder, I think that would be like the most beneficial way to learn. But because of that cultural disconnect that started quite early, I've had to resort to technology and using a lot of technology in order to learn more about my culture.
Okay. I think this might be a good time to look at some other pieces of your artwork, and we can continue to talk as you're showing us your artwork.
Totally. So we can go to the next slide. So this is my BFA grad work. It's called Emotive Ascension. And within my, in between my second and third year at Thompson Rivers University in Kamloops, BC, the southern region of BC went through a pine beetle infestation. So a lot of the trees in town and around Kamloops were kind of like being eaten from the inside out. So when you looked at the forest from a distance, like when I flew back to Kamloops from Yellowknife to in the fall, the forest would look purple because it's this mix of green and red trees, because the red trees were dead, but they were still standing, right? So it was a really like interesting sort of process. But then like half the trees on campus had to be cut down. So there was this massive section of a tree that was left at it's called the sculpture pit outside of the BFA area. And half the trees on campus were cut down. So it was a really like massive sort of infestation. But I saw this log, asked around if it was anyone's. No one knew where it came from or anything, so I just claimed it and began to hollow it out. So it's an 8-foot long, 8-foot high log that's about 2.5 to 3 meters around, and it's hollowed out from the very top to about 3/4 of the way down from the inside. That's what I hollowed out myself. Like parts of it were kind of like rotten on the inside already, but yeah, I was basically like Fred Penner at times, like, you know, crawling into this log with like a reciprocator saw, a crowbar, and just my hands, you know, and like taking out lumps of this like tree and that sort of thing. And then there's a PA speaker on the inside of this work that's emitting a soundtrack that's composed of found sounds, some synths, some guitar, with a huge multi-effect pedal, and it's there to kind of like present the harmony and the chaos of the universe kind of at the same time. And then all around the log, there's like an upside down nest basically that's made up of a bunch of harvested pieces of organic material from all over Kamloops. I collected a lot of it myself, but it got to a point where if I was walking downtown or something and someone had a pickup truck and they had like their back sort of bed full of branches and that sort of thing, I just flag them down and just be like, hey, like, would you be willing to like drop these off at the university? It's closer than the dump and you don't have to pay to drop them off. And they're like, oh yeah, I'll just do that then. Thanks, man. I was like, no, thank you. So I got to credit like some of the public people from Kamloops for contributing to this installation that they had no idea about. But it's like a win-win situation sort of thing. So yeah, and then all of the insides of the log are naturally underneath to kind of like show that's where it comes from, and it also adds a lot of different like smell for the space as well, which is something that I started to work a lot more with within my BFA. There's also bunches of sage that are all around the perimeter of this installation because Thompson Rivers University is surrounded by sage. So it's really cool to just walk around and smell the sage, take a break, that sort of thing. But yeah, there's also a clip if you want to go to the next slide. So this will give you an idea of the soundtrack. I was using a friend's camera at the time, and you're going to hear the lens cap hitting the camera that I couldn't really hear when I was recording it, but it's so present in the audio here. But it gives you an idea of the installation. It's a 50-foot long by 25 feet wide by 15 feet high area. So I think it's the largest sort of installation room that I've acquired before. Yeah, so this is about a year and a half worth of work for this installation, still within grad school, and it definitely, like, I think set me up for being an artist within the arts world in Canada. It got a bit of attention, which then kind of led to other sort of opportunities. So, the main inspiration for this piece, though, it's sort of a abstract sort of inspiration, but allowing myself to be inspired by everything, or a lot of different things. The initial vision, like even with the first photo of this work, was inspired by the movie Alien, where Ripley goes into like the xenomorph queen's chamber and it's just kind of like standing there. So that's sort of what I wanted the feeling of this installation to be. Which really like roots back to my childhood and growing up with the Alien and Predator series and sci-fi and dark sci-fi. So yeah, that's a Mode of Ascension walkthrough video. So we can go to the next slide, please. Yeah, so this is the Gone But Not Forgotten piece that was at the Insurgents Resurgence exhibit. And one thing that I would like to clarify, so yeah, it was a commission by the Winnipeg Art Gallery for the Insurgents Resurgence exhibit. However, the artwork, and this is within my statement as well, so it's an Indigenous arts exhibit, but this piece is dedicated and in remembrance of all of the people that have been found within the river systems in Manitoba. So I just wanted to address that. It's not just specifically Indigenous, because a lot of different people, it's been the result of this. So that's something that I wanted to to make work about, because it's an issue that I think maybe Canada in general, like the government is, feds and that sort of thing, trying to sweep it under the rug because it's an ongoing thing, right? And it's still an ongoing thing. So that's something I just wanted to kind of bring to light for this work. But it was definitely an honor to be involved in this exhibit, because there was people that I'd really looked up to and started idolizing within the early stages of my BFA. And then to be standing side by side them within this exhibit was definitely an honor. I got to spend 2 weeks in Winnipeg, one week at a time. The first week was harvesting all of the driftwood found here alongside the Assiniboine and the Red Rivers. And then the next week that I was down here was installation and for the opening. So it was those 2 weeks, because I was living up in Yellowknife at the time. It was those 2 weeks that really let me know that this is a place where I could live, because I'm really susceptible to energy, like energy of place, energy of people, that sort of thing. And there's just a vibe about Winnipeg that's like Winnipeg is like Yellowknife but bigger. Like that's really how it feels, like straight up. Like I felt so comfortable. I've always felt really comfortable here, not only with like a lot of the indigenous art and that sort of thing, but just a very like down to earth place, And I have a very like low tolerance for pretentiousness, so it's like Winnipeg's pretty cool. Yeah, so it's one of the reasons why I chose to live here and move here. Even though after moving away from Lethbridge, I was like, I'll never live in the plains again, like ever, But the interesting thing about Winnipeg, like that I feel, is that it doesn't really feel like you're in the plains until you leave the city. Then you can kind of like get an idea about it. But just the energy of this place just fits so well, and it's not like a massive city, but it has everything that I need and enough and more for my career, and for my life. And I've always felt really comfortable here, and I want to just thank like the people who have like made that comfortable. So thank you all.
Well, as a lifelong Winnipegger, that gives me, and I'm sure there's many people here who are lifelong Winnipeggers as well, and that's, a very positive message. To feel a lot of pride. Many people say we're a small, big city, or we're a big, small city. And, with that must come those qualities that you're describing. And aren't we fortunate that means that we have another artist of, such talent and growing renown, like you, Casey. So thanks. And I guess I'll just add, when I mentioned that this was the installation that I felt shattered by. You have to imagine standing under it with the skylight at the Winnipeg Art Gallery, bringing light through it. So all of those branches and the pieces of rope, I guess, that attach them all together, were really clear. And when you knew what that was all about, it was, I had many people that, as I led tours, through that exhibition, I had many people that were teary-eyed as they went through it. And kudos to you, Casey, for making art that makes people really feel, something.
Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely an emotional process, like for myself as well, and a lot of the realizations behind it. Sometimes you don't really realize things about an artwork until you're in the process of making it or almost finishing, like installing it. We could probably go to the next slide as well. There's another image of this piece. It was a really interesting process, and the emotional sort of toll. It's part of like with my artwork, I try and push myself as an artist, like not just within the conceptual state, but like I push myself a lot of boundaries in order to grow, like physical boundaries, mental boundaries, all of this sort of thing. So that was definitely something that tested my emotional boundaries. And then when the show was coming down, I think it was up again, or it stayed up for a botany exhibit that was at the WAG at some point, which was kind of like fitting. But when it was coming down, they were doing tours of the Insurgents Resurgence exhibit, and a bunch of tours given to a bunch of, I believe, chiefs and indigenous leaders within Manitoba, and when told about what the work was about and that sort of thing, and that it was going to be coming down, one of the chiefs requested that the wood be burned in ceremony. And they asked me, and I said, absolutely, like that's like the perfect way for the materials to go back to the land. Because with a lot of my installations, if I'm not using any sort of like chemicals or paint or anything within the piece, then I return them to the land. So that was sort of the process that happened with this work as well. And I thought that was really, really beautiful, and I feel honored to have been able to provide that.
Mm-hmm. Just being, I guess I have a question, but I'm just relating to the idea that you seem to have an affinity for pulling different parts of the broader environment into your art with the installations that we've seen so far. I'm sure that is not, in isolation, but it seems like that offers artistic inspiration for you.
Yeah, the land really inspires, like it really provides a lot to us that maybe we're not necessarily aware of. Like one of the most beneficial things you can do for your health or mental health is just go for a walk in the woods, right? Because like there's so much happening there that allows us to be better connected. And then in working with a lot of organic material, there's always been this level of like respect for the material, and this is an indigenous sort of belief, but a lot of people and everyone can kind of like relate to this, is that it's this reciprocal relationship that you have with the land, right? So to be able to work with it in a way that can sort of give these materials another chance at life is something that I like to kind of that I like to do when creating this sort of art, because a lot of the materials that I use in this sort of way have already been detached from the earth. Like I don't really cut much down myself.
Right.
So they're like harvested materials. So I say they're like, like dead pieces of wood. There's the one thing where it's like, describe what you do for a living in layman's terms, and I just said I hang dead wood from the ceiling. But it's like, well, that's very layman's terms, But then like implementation of technology sort of seemed to change that a little bit. And I think maybe you can go to the next slide. It might have perfect. So this is an example of that. This is my piece Sedze, which means time. It was created in the poolside gallery just right next door in 2020 for the Send and Receive Festival. So this is a bunch of driftwood, again, harvested from the river systems. But they were like fused together to create this sort of like alien-like organic material, but maybe from another planet or something. I was kind of just like really trying to think out of the box with this. And it is painted, so I wasn't able to return this to the earth specifically. But within the sort of trunk area of the hanging piece, there's it's a 360 laser range scanner, and it's picking up all of the information from the room, the surrounding area of it. And what that's doing is there's a like a soundscape that's sort of playing. The theme for Send and Receive that year, I believe, was voice. So I used my voice in a bunch of different tones, these hormonal or these harmonious sort of like scales and that sort of thing, to create a soundscape that would be sort of interacted with while people were in the space. So if there was someone that came in from the main door there, the laser would pick them up, and they would sort of contribute to the pitching up and down pitches of the soundtrack. So you can kind of like recognize that there's a interactive element to this installation. And with the sun being projected at one end and the moon being projected at the other, it really challenges you to think about time and what that means to us, and what the sun and moon sort of mean to that as well. and it was also done like within 2020, like the year of the pandemic, and that was like such a weird thing when the pandemic first hit, right? Is because the interpretation of time slowed right down to a stop, but then it also just like flew right by. It was such a like weird experience, especially within those like first few months. So I wanted to make a work that was kind of about that, how different people and species perceive time. And it allowed me to work with this technology as well. So we can go to the next slide. So then leading into my MFA, which was also within the pandemic, what a fun experience that was. So I had the idea to create a matured version of my BFA grad work. So rather than just one big log, I had 5, and they were more freshly cut down. So having to hollow out 5 big pieces of tree was definitely a challenge. But in sort of conceptualizing this work and starting to get into 3D, I decided to make a 3D model of what I wanted the installation to look like, so then I can kind of work towards that. And that process really helped because it allowed me to take things into consideration earlier that I might not have been aware of until I started working on it, or halfway through, or almost complete the installation. So that was an interesting sort of process in the construction of this work. And then, so if you go to the next slide, this is the actual work itself. Because the U of M main gallery, you're not able to hang like very heavy things from the ceiling. I reached out to Urban Shaman, and they were able to get me in for a month to be able to show my MFA work there.
Wonderful.
So I'm really thankful that they were able to do that, and also with the help of Andy Rudolph, who helped me do a lot of the programming for the exhibit as well, because rather than just one laser range scanner, which was in the send and receive exhibit, there's 5 laser range scanners, one for each of these logs, and they each have their own soundscape, but they're all at the same tempo, that if someone's standing in front of one of the logs, or 2 or 3 of the logs, they'll all kind of sync up and play like a bigger sort of soundscape. Because something within the pandemic is that like we weren't allowed to gather for drum circles or ceremony or anything like that. So I wanted to create an artwork that can sort of give people that feeling, because each of the logs has like a Dene drum present, played in a different sort of pattern and that sort of thing. So my MFA work, it's called Tadŭetła, which means connected apart from each other. And this installation has to do with my learning experience of my culture, as well as the pandemic in general, because like we're still connected with each other, but we just can't be close to each other, right? And within all of the videos, that's also triggered by the laser range scanners, there's a binary code that's implemented into the visuals that are examples of what are called the Dene laws. It's like 7 or 8 laws that Dene people tend to just try and abide by. It's just part of our Dene culture. So it's those laws, but converted to binary code, because that's where I've learned a lot about my culture from. And binary code is like a transmission of data sets, a bunch of ons and offs, ones and zeros, that transmits data that could be interpreted into information or language or that sort of thing. So it was just kind of an additional highlight as to how I've used technology to learn more about my culture.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting the way a number of your installations are combining multiple experiences for viewers. You know, so the idea of coming in and having something to see and think about what their own interpretation, you know, what that means to them, the visual aspect of it, but hearing sound at the same time and creating a real immersive, you know, experience. Do you get feedback about that? I'm sure you do. But what kind of feedback do you hear from people as to what that kind of art experience means to them, as opposed to looking at a painting, something that's stationary,
right,
you know, on a wall?
Well, it's always a really, I'm really thankful, first off, for any sort of feedback that I've received about my art. In regards to the immersive aspect of it, that's really what made me fall in love with sculpture and installation from the get-go. You know, utilizing a room to communicate your ideas as opposed to just like a section of the wall. It just seemed to make more sense to me to be able to have this idea surround people, or like be all around, so it kind of can bring out a lot more of the experience. Like smell was one thing that I didn't realize was so important, or isn't naturally like maybe thought of until you put it in a different location, right? Like you smell a flower outside and it's how a flower normally smells, but once you bring that inside, it's like the smell is like heightened somehow because it's like isolated and that sort of thing. So it's one thing that I really started to take into consideration, maybe not worked with, like I'm not really making works about smell, but it's things about that kind of acquire more presence when creating an artwork of. And then naturally the immersive sort of experience within the contemporary art sense moved more into a digital sort of realm for me. So we can go to the next slide. I think it's another slide of this installation. Just gives you an idea of sort of a different landscape within the space. Each of the logs still has their own pile underneath. And then the next slide will be, we're going more into the digital realm now. So I started to create more of these digital works, mostly really inspired by the pandemic. Like that was something that let me know it's like, you know, you have a wider skill set. Because what was happening was that like there was a lot of things scheduled and all these travel plans and that sort of thing, and everything just got canceled or postponed because of the pandemic. So maybe it was like a survival instinct or something that I had, but it's just like I need to start making more digital art so that it could still be shown, it could still be presented like online. I can still create, I can still get these ideas out there. So that's what influenced me to start working more in a digital sense. I acquired free 3D software called Blender 3D, and I started to teach myself it and completely self-taught with this program. And then being able to kind of create ideas like this and sort of relating to my inspiration of different things. So this piece is called Breaking Away, and it's inspired by a song from a band called Rat-a-tat. They're like a two-piece instrumental band out of Brooklyn, New York. And it's an instrumental song, but this song itself brings out so much emotion in me. It makes me think about so many different things. And one of the things that this work is about is like breaking away from the natural cycle, breaking away from city life and immersing yourself in nature, breaking away from the struggles of life, and you know, to kind of like just to try and, you know, be better as yourself, right? So yeah, it was definitely like a transition sort of period and transition work for me as well.
Okay. I think we should move to the walk in a circle slides at this point. Yeah.
Yeah. So if you want to go back to the last slide there. So this is a beaded card holder that I received as a gift from the Tadŭetła Annual Youth Conference. I taught a music workshop out there, and they gave us a goodie bag at the end, which had all these awesome things in there. And a beaded card holder was one of the things. And I was looking at it one day, and I just thought like that would make for a really cool like texture in a 3D environment. So I took a few photos of it, and then if you want to go to the next slide there, I applied that photo as like a texture for this figure that's walking. And this was the first walk cycle piece that I made, and it really just started as an experiment. But applying this texture to it, it immediately starts to give those things like a different way of presentation or a different like form of life. So I made this figure that's walking through this like star field of beads. And it's like ricocheting off of the person or the figure, and that was the implementation of physics within 3D software, and that was something that it's fascinating, physics in a digital space. but allowed me to kind of create more works like this. And then, so initially I was really apprehensive about even posting this because it's like I'm not a beadwork artist, but I really admire beadwork because it's been around my whole life. And so like putting this out there to like post it, one thing in the back of my mind is like, what are beadworkers going to think about this, you know? But they loved it, so it was like awesome. It's looked at definitely more and created as a form of respect, you know? But it just gave me more inspiration to make more works sort of in this fashion by being inspired by indigenous arts and life materials. So if you go to the next slide, this started the Tadŭetła Walk in a Circle series, where I'm using a bunch of materials and creating these sort of more like spirits or creatures out of these materials. So this piece is called Antler, made up of digitally created moose, caribou, and deer antler, because those are like three of the horned animals that kind of live the most in the north. And yeah, it gives me a lot of freedom in order to create these works. This one is like definitely one of the most horrific of the walk cycles. It creeped a lot of people out. It's like, good, that's what it was supposed to do, you know? Yeah, it's been a really fun process. I have so much fun making these pieces. Like, and then the audio aspect of them, each of the footstep, whenever a spirit's ground, like foot or whatever, hits the ground, you hear the sound of a Dene drum, because that's like my connection to my culture, the grounded aspect of it all. And then you'll hear like clanging of bones and antler together, and that groaning sound that it's emitting. That's actually a moose call, like that I recorded and really stretched it out and octaved it down quite a lot. So normally it's like, but you know, stretching it out and octaving it down, it sounds more like, you know. So
okay,
that was a lot of fun.
Just be ready. I'm going to ask you, because there's more of these, which your favorite one is. Okay, carry on.
Yeah, so we could scrub to the next character, the next figure. Which will be quills. Oh, here we go. So this is quills, inspired by porcupine quills. I wanted to create something with definitely like a black and white and grayscale sort of theme. I wanted to create something that was, that looked like a mix of cute and dangerous, just like a porcupine, you know? So it's still one of my favorite walk cycle pieces, because I don't know why, I just really enjoy it. And then the physics properties of this is like the shooting ability of the porcupine, like how it can shoot its quills. It was kind of like all the quills falling off of it and flying into the sky. The audio for this, again, the Dene drum, but just like a little bit of trem picking with a delay with my guitar and like some bass synth happening, and that's really all I needed for this piece. So we could scrub to the next one. Ancestors. This was the second walk cycle piece that I made, and it's inspired by tanned moose and caribou hide. Hide tanning is a really big thing within my culture. And I called it Ancestors because when creating it, first off, I thought it was really like, it had this really dark energy to it, but also just a very confident and meaningful energy. And it's called Ancestors because it really kind of pays tribute to the ancestors and grandparents and uncles and that sort of thing in my life that were hard on me, but for a reason, you know, because they wanted us to grow up to be responsible adults and to help us reach our true potential, you know. So that's kind of what this work specifically is dedicated towards. We can scrub to the next video. This is dentalium, inspired from dentalium shells, which way back in history used to be used as a form of currency. And I did a bunch of research into this work as well, because I've only seen dentalium as the shell. I've never seen a live sort of mollusk as it is, and then to put it in like underneath the water, because that's sort of its natural habitat. So we can go to the next one. So I wanted to make another version of beadwork because the first one that I made was very figurative. It's like you could tell it's like a feminine character. And one of the reasons why I wanted to create these walk cycles more in this sort of form is that it removes any sort of like gender construct or that sort of thing from the work itself. And also I had another idea for physics to implement within it as well. So came up with this like beadwork kind of cluster character, which is very high color, which is like not my norm, but again, like to push myself as an artist, it's like you got to work with more colors just rather than just black, Casey. It's like, okay, yeah, let's try all the colors then. And the creation of the audio for this was a lot of fun because there's like a swishing sound within the piece, and so the drum again for the feet. But to get that swishing sound, I put a bunch of beads in a spaghetti jar lid and just like recorded it as I watched the video of it. So it like I can sync that up to it. And then for all of the beads falling off of the figure onto the ground, I really just put my mic like right up against my desktop and just dropped a bunch of beads onto it. And then using those sounds into the works as well was kind of how that was created. But yeah, definitely one of the funnest sort of audio soundscapes I've made for the walk cycle works. Then we could scrub to the next one, or it's right here. So this is tufting, which is inspired by moose and caribou hair tufting. A lot of my friends reached out to me after I posted this, and they're just like, dude, like, are you okay? Like, are you on drugs or anything like that? And it was the first work that I made that was so high color, and that's why, is because usually I have a very like dark or muted sort of aesthetic within my artwork. So seeing something like that, like my friends were just like, I just wanted to make sure, like, you know, you're okay and stuff. Like moose and caribou hair tufting is colorful. You know, I want to make everything look like that. So the hills in the background are tufted, little bunny, you know, there's a fox in the background eating that's all tufted. And I just want to create this sort of like universe. And I think there's one more in this series we could scrub to. This is one of the most recent ones I've made. It's called Spruce Gum, which is inspired by basically tree sap. So this render specifically shows like kind of the process of sap and how it falls off the tree, because it's used a lot within indigenous culture and like Dene culture as a form of medicine. You know, a lot of people use tree sap for various different things, spruce gum tea, spruce leaf tea, pine needle tea, that sort of thing. So the audio for this is very minimal, with just ravens and stuff in the background. And then it loops back around. So.
Wow, this series is absolutely amazing. I said that I was going to ask everybody to say what their favorite one was. And I'll start first by saying that originally, well, I have two. It's the first one, the beaded female figure. But then I just can't let go of the tufted figure as well. Anybody else want to share what their favorite is?
This one?
Awesome.
Okay.
No, for me, this one's too creepy. I know what your intended effect.
Yeah.
But yeah, like the tufted one is like so cute, but I like the beaded, like the porcupine one. Like, that's all just random colorful beads.
Okay.
Awesome.
Okay.
Thank
The
you.
beaded one.
I also like the antler one. Yeah. But once I look at it for a moment, it's not creepy at all. It's interesting.
Right. Yeah, and they all have a different aesthetic, you know, and that was the goal for it, you know, to try and elicit different sort of like emotions, different sort of meanings, and also the subjectivity of art. That's one thing that I really enjoy about art in general is the subjectivity. Like these were shown at Nuit Blanche last year, and it was interesting because at times like I just let it play, and I had an interactive installation going on as well. But I just kind of like walked around the crowd and kind of, honestly, I was kind of eavesdropping a little bit, just to like whatever anyone's saying about my artwork, I could just sit there and listen, right? Because like I'm not going to care if someone misinterprets something. It's like it's all about the subjectivity, right? So I heard someone just be like, "Oh, I really like the balloon one." You know, and that was, you know, the beadwork piece. But there's nothing on the video itself that says beadwork or the title or anything. So it really lent itself up to this kind of subjective interpretation of what it is. I thought that was really interesting.
Well, I think that actually you're ending on a really good note, because although the art talk is very much helping us to learn more about an artist and what your inspiration is and your intent and technique and the meaning, when you say that, we're reminded that art is also about how something comes across to us and what our reflections are and how it relates to our life and our experiences. And I think that's a really important, you've just triggered, I think an important point for all of us to remember. Casey, I want to thank you. This has been an absolutely terrific art talk, and the degree to which you've shared as we've looked at your art work here has just been fabulous. And we always give everybody a chance for questions and answers. So anybody want to ask Casey a question?
And this is, so my website, which I need to update. I want to make a new website. It's kind of minimal. The majority of my artwork, almost all of it, kind of goes to Instagram. And then I have a YouTube channel as well that anything that's video-based, I'll post it there.
Okay,
But
thank
yeah,
you.
definitely up for questions if anyone has anything. I'm quite open and transparent, so I can talk about pretty much anything.
I think my friend has a question. Nope. Okay. I thought it was here. I thought maybe you did.
I just like that you've done always included nature in all of your pictures or your art. So I really like the idea that you've used nature in a different way. So yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think
Thank you.
that's great.
Yeah, it's always very inspiring, and using technology to work with nature in a different way has been inspiring as well. Like LiDAR scanning. There's LiDAR scanning apps with your phone, and you can use your phone to scan things and turn them into 3D objects. And
And I like the beadwork in a different context, in different form. I think that's beautiful.
excellent, thank you so much. There's a question there?
Yeah, I was really struck by the ephemeral nature of what you're doing in that, and it's, I don't have a question. Just to call it, right? That, this creating something and then letting it go so easily
Right.
is like, I see that as being very unusual as an art practice.
Yeah.
And that it's very, like it's a very conscious thing as well. So I thought, and you kind of have like really solved a big problem for yourself. In that, if you're making art, what do you do with it later,
Right.
right?
Yeah. Well,
Which
it's
anyway.
it's interesting you say that, because like I had to get used to, and it was like it was a personal battle. I really had to get used to showing artwork twice. Because like for a lot of my artworks, it's just like a one-time thing, and sometimes it still is, but I really enjoy that. I really think that there's something kind of special about a one-time artwork. It exists for that time within this finite amount of time that we have in our lives, and that sort of thing. There's some artworks that, like, a lot of artists want their art to live forever. I mean, like, who doesn't, right? But there's something really interesting and intimate and kind of special about creating like a one-time work.
And it's not performance art, like it's a
Right.
sculpture. Sculpture is usually, you come at it and it's like forever, or it's like, like, anyway, I thought that was very interesting.
Yeah, being able to let it go, like
Yeah.
even mandalas,
Yeah.
they make a mandala and they break it away. Like it's not supposed to be forever. Nothing's supposed to be forever. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know, if I would end up with a question, it would be like, then, like, do you spend a lot of time or mental energy or whatever on like documentation of your work, like that kind of preservation, like if you're working in something that's very ephemeral.
Documentation is absolutely important.
Yeah.
I first learned about that, or how important it was within halfway through my BFA. And since then, it's like I document everything, like every step of the way. I really like to show my work in process. So a lot of, stuff on Instagram will just be like, oh, I'm working on this thing, this is the stage that I'm at. Like, I like that transparency, like, because I like seeing that as well from other people. That's like a shared learning opportunity for artists, I find. And just to be that transparent, it's like, this isn't just the final polished thing that I want you to see. I want to be able to show you, like, this is how it looked when it was still, like, in shambles or something. Yeah, so it's a interesting process, kind of like all the way. But that's just me, like every artist, every person is different, and that's what makes like the world such an interesting sort of place, right?
Mm-hmm. So. Definitely. Do we have one more question or comment?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you have any sort of like common grounding space where you just come up with the initial ideas, initial thoughts? What is that like?
It's like inspiration, as mentioned before, like inspiration can really come from all over the place. Shower thoughts. I mean, like, it's interesting how many ideas come to you when you're in the shower. So I come from a small town, Yellowknife, 29,000 people. I'm a bit older, so like cruising is a thing for me. I'll go for a cruise, totally like small town vibe. Some people in bigger cities, like, you just drive around. It's like, yeah, man, go for a cruise, I said that to some people, and they're just like, you're so small town. Like, it's hilarious. It's like, Yellowknife, like, come on. But a lot of ideas come to me when I'm cruising, when I just go for a drive. It's really got me, so I bought my vehicle down here, like, in February of 2020, like 1 month before the pandemic. Perfect timing.
Oh,
totally accidental,
very good.
but perfect timing. And just to drive outside of the city, at that point, it really gave me an appreciation for the plains. Like, it was a time where I was just like, I get it now. I get it why people from the plains love the plains so much, like the endless skies, like the cloud systems, all like how high the clouds can get here is just like amazing. So that was sort of a time for me that was just like, I felt like I can stretch my arms, because at the beginning of the pandemic, it just felt like you're just closed in. You felt weird about leaving the house, all this sort of stuff. It finally gave me the mental freedom to just be like, I could just breathe, and so I just love heading out, out west, like around the sunset sort of time, go over towards the Headingley area across the river, and then back down on that road that eventually, I think it's Roblin, that turns into Grant. That's like one of my favorite drives, going out there. And to be able to like drive down past that like river road, that's where I first discovered Shelmerdine. And then like, so sometimes we'll just stop in Shelmerdine and just like walk around, because I just love the smells of that place. And then eventually I started buying plants, and I'm just like, I'm a plant guy. I like plants. I didn't know at all that I was into like plants or whatever, and I don't have like
Keep them alive?
I was gonna say I don't really have a green thumb, but man, when I acquired an aloe plant, it was like one of my first plants. I acquired an aloe plant, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna water this thing all the time. Like I'm gonna take such good care of it. It's like, you're not really supposed to water aloe plants, So I killed my first aloe plant because I was trying to love it too much. But yeah, it's been really interesting, just that process of like self-reflection and kind of like learning about yourself, and just how much plants and that sort of thing can do for us, and like how euphoric just smells of a place can be.
Absolutely.
So that's one of the places or ways I acquire my inspiration, and where some of my ideas come from. Also, like problem solving as well. If I'm going through like something about whatever, relationship, art, life. It's just like just getting outside, going for a walk, going for a drive, like can just sometimes just make things click.
In that case, I would really recommend the leaf biome.
Yeah, I've been there.
Anytime
Yeah, that was quite amazing. I'd like to go again as well. just to check it out maybe in a more intimate sort of setting.
Apparently they have butterflies back again.
Oh, nice. Yeah, when I was there last time, they were flying around up in the upper area there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that we will wrap up because I know Claire is keen to get those who'd like to go on the the art walk organized. But thank you once again, and there's likely still snacks. So.
Awesome. Thanks, Susan.
Casey, you gave such a really full presentation. I really appreciate it.
Awesome.
And so much detail and personality as you did it, and you were really good.
Awesome. Thank you. Talking is very well versed.